There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel. It's a beautiful day out there, but it's just too damn hot. So I didn't go out, because I don't deal with hot sunny days. I might be filming inside for the rest of the summer, because it's supposed to be a very hot summer. If I had gotten up earlier, I'd have borne it, but I couldn't bear it. So here I am inside. I've got news. Kenji and I have joined the Saskatoon Japanese Association. Yes, there is such an organization. I had known about it and don't think it's particularly active. I don't know what kind of a membership it has, but we have joined because we found out that they're having their annual meet and greet kind of party or social event tomorrow. That would be a way, I hope, for Kenji to meet Japanese people, Japanese-speaking people in Saskatoon, and also, who knows, maybe find somebody who's looking to hire a Japanese speaker. For all of those reasons, we're going. It's going to take forever to get there on the bus. I hope it's worthwhile. I had a biblio adventure last night. It was quite different than my usual ones. This was a work of nonfiction. It's a memoir by a wildlife veterinarian. I think he still lives in Saskatoon. He certainly did for decades. He's British by birth, Jerry Haigh. And it's called In Velvet, Elk, Wapiti, and Deer. What an amazing presenter he was. He just spoke so eloquently. And I did scan the book and saw that it was written in that same style. So it's not a dense academic treatise or anything. It's very conversational in tone. He was wonderful. Big, booming British voice. Didn't really need a mic. And he had a lovely slideshow showing many of the pictures in the book. He was hired by the U of S, I don't know when, 1960s maybe, from Africa. He had been working with rhinos and so on in Africa, and elephants. And then he came here, and he had never known anything about elks, and elks became his specialty. The way he talked about his work with treating wounded or ill animals in the wild was absolutely fascinating. And he eventually got into elk farming. And once he started talking about farming, I began to be a little bit uncomfortable because the farming, maybe deer more than elk, but elk as well, is for supplying animals for hunting, and I'm not so sure about that. When it's used for meat, I love wild meat, especially deer. Oh my god, but moose is really good too. My brother-in-law specializes in, and I didn't know until my mom told me last night, that my sister, her husband, they only eat meat that he hunts and kills, so they don't buy meat in stores at all anymore. And that I have no problem with. It tastes delicious. Can't remember if I have had elk yet. Anyway, there's probably a critique about domesticating wild animals for the purpose of providing them for hunters to shoot and kill, and nobody raised the ethics of that in the conversation, and I chose to remain silent. He was a fascinating man, and he presented his material with vivacity, so that was very enjoyable. Speaking of enjoyable, I think you're going to deeply enjoy this week's mystery guest. This week's mystery guest is the Black gay American writer, Doug Jones, joining us from Atlanta. And we're here to talk about his debut novel, came out at the end of April, which I was so excited about when I heard about it. I pre-ordered it. It is called The Fantasies of Future Things. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Sean. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I just love the title. I want you to tell us about the title eventually. And that picture is to die for. So give us an introduction to The Fantasies of Future Things.
Would you like to start with the picture?
Oh, absolutely. Why not? Yes.
The picture is a whole story, particularly as the import of covers go. And we went through a bunch of iterations of the cover, and I was extremely unhappy with the covers that were initially proposed. And then the publisher of Simon & Schuster, the actual man who was a publisher at that time, was reading my questionnaire, and he said, Doug says this book is for Black gay men, so put 2 Black gay men on the cover. And my editor, Joan, found that cover as an artist by the name of Shakith. Now, I don't know if Shakith is Brooklyn-based or LA-based, but he had this fabulous photo. I think it's called Fill My Blues or something. I can't remember the exact title.
I'm just looking at it here in the notes. Brush Your Blues.
Brush Your Blues. And when I saw that cover, it really, the photo itself just took my breath away, because it is the intimacy. It is both hard and soft. It is the anonymity. but it is also the knowingness. And I thought that brought all the elements of the novel together. And so my editor very much was responsible for that cover because I was just doing somersaults over the other covers. And I was just like, oh my God, oh my God. And he was like, calm down, just calm down. This is part of the process. And so that's how we ended up with that cover, which is absolutely beautiful.
This was among many other reasons that I wanted it. It was a cover by. I just love it. So that's fantastic. What's the opening premise? It's a fascinating one.
Oh, goodness. So, two Black men, I think I can say that, working in real estate, in small community real estate. At the time when it is announced that the Olympics are coming to Atlanta, working for a small real estate development company that has targeted this neighborhood of Summerhill for redevelopment. The developer wants that Summerhill to be ground zero for her great development plans across the inner city core of Atlanta. And our protagonists, Jacob and Daniel, have to decide whether or not they want to participate in that. And on the way, they are discovering who they are in terms of their family relationships, their relationships to community, their relationships to each other as friends, as Black men, and also their sexuality. And so it is a lot that goes in and stirs up in the pot, but I think it is exactly the way we live our lives today, right? I don't think that we get to live in one specific lane at a time. I think we all live multiple parallels all at once. We cannot down gear and say, this is what I'm going to do for right now, and this is what I'm going to do for right now. It all comes at us at the same time. So that is the story. And by the end of it, hopefully the reader will agree that each character has his own evolution as to what the future means to him, what his present means to him, and how his past has helped him navigate those spaces and arrive to where he is going on the path forward.
That's a wonderful description. I have read the synopsis. I don't usually like to read the synopsis. I like to go in not knowing anything about it. But by the time I read this, I will have forgotten what I read. But in terms of putting more of how it opens in, so they were friends, acquaintances before they were put together for this project. Is that right?
No, no, they met each other on the project. And so
That's
the opening chapter, the tension that is happening between them is because they are still who they are, learning who they are in relations to one another and learning who they are in relations to the project. Yeah.
So I think we can safely say that they don't meet each other as openly. They're not out to each other when they first meet.
No, they're not. No, no.
And they don't end up as a couple. That's also quite clear from the synopsis, isn't it?
Yes, that's clear.
But one of them does meet somebody else. So it's not that kind of a conventional story, which makes it all sound all the more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like at least this project that they are brought together to work on, which is an uncomfortable one for them. I think it sounds like that you're bringing a lot of politics into it. How political of a novel is this, if that's not a stupid question?
It's not a stupid question, but I don't know if it's a political novel, if you will. I think that it is, again, a novel that responds to the way we navigate and live our lives today. If we look at, well, you're in Canada, thank God, right? But if we look at, but even in Canada, right, the political environment that's happening in America and the US casts a shadow. And the ways in which policy decisions, the decisions made up on the hill somewhere far away from us as individuals, have the capacity to really impact our lives. And I wanted to show that interrelatedness of just how those decisions, what they mean, and what happens in terms of the impacts. They're not separate. They're not, again, they're not distinct. What happens over here isn't the only thing that happens over here. It has a reverberating effect, and just boom, there's always a cascading effect. And so I wanted to show that politics is definitely a driver, and it's definitely one of the plot points, if you will, but I don't see it as a political novel.
And Jacob is a Brooklyn transplant, and Daniel, on the other hand, is an Atlanta native. So there's probably those kinds of issues about regional perspectives going on. I happen to know, it's not a secret, it's on your website, that you are a Morehouse graduate and Brooklyn transplant. Here's the inevitable question. How autobiographical is this? Are
Not
you,
very.
Jacob?
No, it's not. I would say the autobiographical part deals with the emotion and the sentiment that Jacob and Daniel are very close to who I am emotionally. The novel is fiction. The circumstances that happened in the novel did not occur at all. But I think that being completely 100% honest, that there are sentiments and ways of being and certain parallels that happen between the character that is certainly I draw from my own life.
And how do I put this? Were you conscious as this story took root in you, or as you began to write I'm sure, many drafts of it, of writing in a context of other Black gay literature, other Black gay texts? And can you riff on that for a few minutes?
Absolutely. I write. You're familiar? Are you familiar with Joseph Beam and Marlon Riggs and Essex Hemphill?
Yes, mostly by name, but certainly aware of them. Yes.
So when I came out to myself, first in the late 80s, early 90s, I saw no representations of Black gay men at all. Didn't know where we were, didn't know what my life was. I was just scared, shitless out of my mind. What is this? Like an attraction to other men? Like, I have no idea what this is. And I did not even know if life was possible to live one's life like that. And I, just searching around, not even searching around, just trying to exist and navigate what I knew to be my reality, but I did not understand how I would be able to live my reality. A very dear friend, straight man, heterosexual man, let's say, he gave me the first volume of Other Countries, and it shook my world. It was incredible to read this literature, poetry and short stories and some essays about other Black gay men who were living their lives as Black gay men and who were proud about it. And that is when I began to construct my own identity as a Black gay man. That's when I saw the possibility that I could actually live and be productive and be happy and be fruitful. And those authors, Essex Hemphill and Joseph Beam and Marlon Riggs and Asado Saint and so many others, Daniel Woods and Colin Robinson, they were a part of this collective at that time that was producing work that called out to Black gay men, that called our realities, that helped us construct our identities, the communities in which we live. They gave face to it. And so when I write into that history, many of them, most of them, we lost to AIDS and we lost the work that they were producing. Many of them were at the beginning of their writing careers or just starting to tip over into areas of success and just starting to make a name for themselves. And so I am very clear that I am writing in the tradition of those writers. I'm writing truth, I'm writing passion, I'm writing honesty, some anger, some rage, but I'm writing about family, I'm writing about community, I'm writing about individuals who I know who are out there, who are real. And I'm writing for our healing. I think that is really important. I don't think in our times, as quote unquote out as we are, as many choices as we have to identify ourselves, I don't know that everyone is having a good time with it. And when I say a good time, I don't know that families and friends and communities and employers are as accepting as we would like them to be of our realities. And so I'm writing into that space of healing myself, healing families, healing communities, contributing to the healing of this environment.
I'm feeling knotted muscles relax as I listen to you talk about this book. This is wonderful. Am I right that is there two sections that have the title on a gray page? So far, I'm flipping through it. It looks like there's two. Is that right?
Yeah, Anger and Hope. Yes.
Anger and Hope. Is there anything more you want to say about titling the two sections?
The anger is the frantic searching, the quest, the history, you will, the coming into the knowledge of what is happening, like what is occurring to me. And not just what is occurring to the individual, what is occurring around the individual. What is the story in which all of these people are caught, not just Jacob and Daniel. By that time, you have met Sherman, you have been introduced to Beth, Daniel's history, you meet his mother, you meet the wonderful little boy, Augie, and how all of these people are coming together within this circumstance, within this specter of the Olympics coming, right? And the Olympics is haunting everything, right? It's just, this is what's happening. And then hope is the navigation, how they go through the wash and what comes out on the other side. And very much the title, The Fantasies of Future Things, what they find out about their lives, about their circumstances, about how they're going to move and how they're going to survive.
You chose an excerpt from a short story by Randall Kenan in Let the Dead Bury Their Dead. I'd forgotten that was a short story collection. I thought it was a novel. Anyway, tell us about you and Randall Kenan and or why you chose that lovely.
And I love his work. That is one of my favorite books. I constantly go back and reread and let's see how Randall would handle this question. I think he is an amazing writer. I wish I had the opportunity to meet him before he passed. But his work, he had A Visitation of Spirits. He had another short story collection that was just published recently within the last 2 years. And then, of course, his nonfiction work, the essays that he wrote, interviews with Black folks as he traveled across America. He is an absolute American treasure. And I just think he's an incredible.
What are you working on now, Doug?
I am, besides getting my house fixed from the tree falling on it,
Oh, God.
I am starting to work on the next novel. And the next novel, so there will always be a theme of real estate. Some aspect of real estate will be a thread line that happens in my work. And I think that's because we live our lives in these houses, apartment, whatever it is that we living in, the physical thing that we're living in, there is a story attached to it. It's set in what's called the Low Country along the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. And it is a grandfather's second attempt at fatherhood. When we meet the grandfather, we pretty quickly become aware that the grandfather's son has died, and the grandfather is left to raise his grandchild. And the story is all about those dynamics that happen and the specter, the haunting, if you will, that happens over the story is the fact that the grandfather has this land that developers are after. And so he has to raise his grandson, protect his grandson, and usher him into however far he can get him into adulthood with the time that the grandfather has left. And also make sure that the legacy of this land is still there or not, however it's going to happen, figure out how to protect this land for his grandson's future.
Wow, I always have to bite my tongue and not say, please hurry up, I want to read it, but it sounds amazing. A little bit of a flippant question. Is there anything about a tree falling on that house?
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Although I will say, and I'm just playing around right now. So the grandfather, he is a carpenter, like cabinet maker. So he makes cabinets, he makes tables, chairs, countertops. He's very much an artisan. And that is part and parcel to this story of creation that I hope to capture in the novel. And that is part of the gift that he has given his son, the son that's not there, and that he hopes his grandson will inherit. And so a part of the story writing process is just throwing all these things into the pot and figuring out what threads come out on the other side.
I'm going to try to choose my words carefully so it doesn't sound like an overly personal question, but you did say at the beginning of introducing the work in progress that the theme of real estate will be a thread through your work. Why?
Oh, real estate is my second love.
Okay.
I did not know when I was growing up, I did not know people made money at real estate. I didn't know what that was. And then when I found out that they made money, and I'm a realtor on the other side of the job. Like my full-time gig has been as a realtor.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
there's one part of the answer. Absolutely.
yeah. Poking around to people's houses, going on house tours, seeing how people live. All that is terribly interesting to me, right? Because I think it tells a story of how people live. When you arrive and you look in their house and you can tell different things. I really didn't know that you could make, growing up, I didn't know you could make money at that. And then when I found out that you could, we might think differently of realtors now, but in the 70s and 80s growing up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, they didn't have the best reputation. And I would hazard that realtor was right up there with car salesperson, used car salesperson. It's always gonna stick with me. But there are stories attached to these houses, to these places that we live in. And I've had the most interesting interactions with people around the sale of their house. And I think that those are worth exploring. I find it very interesting.
It is absolutely fascinating. And as far as I'm aware, you're the only realtor novelist. Is that true? Do you know any other realtor writers of fiction?
I'm sure that there's some that maybe they're working at getting their stories out there, but I can't be the only one.
Because it seems like a great combination in terms of the access to other people's homes and lives and how that would stimulate a fiction writing brain. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple of books I've read recently that had realtors as characters, but I'm not aware of any that
Were
were.
they good characters?
They were interesting characters, complex characters. One was in a novel that I didn't really like by Mona Simpson called Old Keck Road. I remember one and I've forgotten the author's name. It's a white female American author. And it was a short story where the realtor would, I think, bring her grandmother's favorite little dish antique and put it in the home of any home she was showing as a good luck thing. And that's all I really remember about it now. But anyway, that's fascinating.
Tiare Jones is a very dear friend of mine, my sister from Spelman. And I think I could say this now. When An American Marriage was out, I was helping her find a house.
Oh, oh,
And one
wow.
of our, love letters is that she gets this book. She had her book. She brings her novel. She's like, I want them to accept the offer. Do you think I should autograph a book? I was like, yes, autograph. And so the seller of that house was overjoyed when she came. We went and saw the house and we were submitting the offer. We saw the house the second time we were submitting the offer. And Tiare had autographed and wrote a love letter to her. Not a love letter, but we call them love letters in real estate when a buyer writes to a seller. But she had written this letter inside of her novel and left the novel there. And it was at the time, it was like one of the hottest selling novels. Oprah had just selected it and everything else.
That's
And it was just like, oh, I got a signed autographed copy from Tiare Jones and everything else. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I love that. That's incredible. I'd like to know a little bit about Doug Jones, the reader. I think you have some books to recommend.
Yes. And so besides Randall Kenan,
For somebody who hasn't read Randall Kenan, which one do you recommend I start with?
Let the Dead Bury Their Dead. That is the short story collection.
Yes.
I am also reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Message. I'm reading Marlon James, A Brief History of Seven Murders. I started that and then stopped because I started reading Ta-Nehisi, and then I stopped because I'm reading a book that's about to come out from this writer, Rob Franklin, called Great Black Hope. He's an amazing writer. He's coming out with a novel. I think it's going to make an imprint. It is a generational dialogue. It is very much a novel of this period. He's a millennial. I'm pretty sure he's a millennial. And some of the questions millennials ask about opportunity, about where they are in terms of being. and what success means to them and what happiness means to them. That is, I just finished reading it this morning, as a matter of fact. And my talk with him, we're going to have his author talk on June the 9th.
Doug, this has been a wonderful conversation, and once I've had a chance to read The Fantasies of Future Things, I would love to have you come back, and we'll chat in depth.
I'd love to. I'd love to come back, and I've enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much.
That book sounds so fascinating, and he was an amazing guest, so I hope I can carve out a space in my reading life to get to it sooner rather than later. I'm working on editing and publishing 2 longer than normal videos that I want to get out by the end of the month. I'm probably not going to quite make it, but soon thereafter, so I have nothing posted this week. Let's go directly to the books. I have quite a bit to tell you. I have finished 3. The first one that I finished was for my Patreon book club. If you are interested in supporting me, there's information about how to do so via Patreon in my show notes every week on every video. We read the American novel During the Reign of the Queen of Persia by Joan Chase, published in about 1983, I think. It is a modern American classic, for sure. It was wonderful. I loved it. It's not a Sean book in the deep sense, but it's a masterpiece of American fiction, and it's about a family of Ohio farmers. The most striking thing about it is the point of view. There are 4 granddaughters, 2 sets of siblings, I believe, certainly 1 set of siblings, and then the other 2 are cousins. But I think the other set of 2 are also siblings. That was either never clear or I have already forgotten that. But no matter, that narrate the text in the first person plural, we. And even when they are talking about something that happened to or was made to happen by one of those 4, it was still all we. It was intricate and confusing in a fascinating way, and I think expertly done. So if that type of point of view is at all interesting to you, you must check this out just for that. It's 215 pages, but it's a saga, a family saga, going from the grandparents down to the grandchildren. The grandparents, there was just more daughters coming out of the woodwork with every chapter, so I don't even know, 6 girls maybe, and then quite a lot of grandchildren as well. The family dynamic is Tennessee Williams-esque on steroids. A lot of fighting, a lot of physical fighting, a lot of sexual molestation and domestic abuse. And yet, what Joan Chase brings off in the narration is that these girls have never known anything else, and they are trying to make sense of it in a way that marries all of that dysfunction. This is one of the most dysfunctional families in all of literature. There's a lot of family love, affection, and nurturing going on as well. Holy smokes. Margaret Atwood, in her 1983 review in the New York Times, said something like, During the Reign of the Queen of Persia is like a Norman Rockwell painting gone bad. I think another reason you can appreciate what else is going on in this family besides just horrific dysfunction is that one of the daughters dies of slow death, and that is told so poignantly, and the ramifications of that is really the central story in many ways. The title comes from the nickname for the grandma during the reign of the Queen of Persia. She is the matriarch and grew up in Hardscrabble, I think, Ohio, and through an inheritance especially became rich in maybe middle age, and she is using her wealth to get revenge on her husband and anybody else who crosses her path, and she's kind of attempting to be retired from the household, goes off every night to play bingo and doesn't tell anybody much of, no matter what's happening in the family. She gets dressed up and goes out and lets everybody says, fend for yourself. She is one of the more fascinating characters I've encountered in recent reading. The other part of it that was fascinating was in a farming setting and land, property, how land ownership and then giving up the land, selling the property, affects family dynamics. Just fascinating. Everybody in our book group loved it as well, and I recommend it to you very highly. I have finished the biography of King James I of England, who was King James, I think, the 6th of Scotland, called Queen James by Gareth Russell. The life and loves of Britain's first King. This is the UK edition. The American edition isn't coming out until December, and it has a really boring title, I think. The Six Loves of King James I or something. Queen James is quite apropos. It's not only about his gay life, and he was very gay, and for the times, flagrantly gay. When you're the king, you can get away with stuff that common people of the homosexual persuasion in the era would not be able to. And he was very paranoid about being discovered outside of those circles, and there were rumors flying almost from day one. He became king at about the age of 2 months or something. He's the only son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and he succeeds his mother's executioner, Queen Elizabeth I of England, by political machinations, although he did genealogically qualify, and so he moved lock, stock, and barrel over to London. He was ornery, he was vindictive, he was a very kind man, and he was a genius in many ways as a writer and a thinker. He got sucked into the witchcraft hysteria after resisting it at first, and then later resisting it again for the bulk of his life, but he did get caught up in it. People were burned as a result of his involvement, as well as him later saving many people from being falsely accused. So, a bit of a mixed record there. His relationships with beautiful young men are richly detailed here. This was a pseudo-buddy read with this huge supporter of my channel and also an upper-tier patron. This was one of her buddy reads as one of the benefits of being an upper-tier patron, and so we filmed a chat about it, but we've decided to not put it up until closer to the American pub date in December. He liked pretty young boys, so that's kind of relatable. And somebody of that era said in 1623, unknown author, Elizabeth was king, now James is queen. And he, in so many ways, was. So, with all of the servants that a monarch of that era, still to this day in many ways, has, there was a proximity, including during the night, that servants would be in the next room or at the foot of his bed. That's how these assignations started. And one of the interesting tidbits in here was that sometime in the early 21st century, at one of his palaces, a secret passageway was discovered for the first time between the king's bedroom and his boyfriend's bedroom, and nobody knew about it until 2004. That's fascinating. This was more of a standard, straightforward biography than I was expecting, because I read and loved Russell's earlier biography of the Queen Mum, which is called Do Let's Have Another Drink. It wasn't anecdotal in a bad way, but it was structured through short anecdote-like snippets of her biography, not necessarily in chronological order, and revealing larger themes of her life. And I love that style, at least the way he did it. This was more straightforward, starting from birth and coming to his death. But I enjoyed it. It did drag in a couple places for me, but it was a 5-star read, and I recommend it highly, especially if you're interested in any of this. The last thing I'll say about what's in the book is that it opens the prologue with him. By then, he's been on the English throne, the British throne, for 10, 15 years, and he goes back for his first visit to Scotland and stops off at some friend's house who's an engineer and wants to show him this waterway kind of thing, and it involves taking the king into a little basement, and the king comes back onto the surface. He realizes he's surrounded on all 4 sides by water, and he starts screaming, "Treason! Treason! Treason!" He thinks somebody's kidnapping him or going to kill him by drowning, and it takes a long time to calm him down. Well, that was a great way to begin this, because he lived through such violence. His mother, very, very pregnant mother, Mary Queen of Scots, was threatened. One of the rebels pointed a loaded gun at her belly, threatening to kill her and her baby, and one of her favorite courtiers was killed. And throughout his life, he was kidnapped more than once, and the threat of kidnap was ever present. And then the gunpowder plot, not gunpowder fiction and plot, but the gunpowder plot, I didn't realize that was during his reign that happened, and there's a fair bit about that in here. So he was paranoid. Well, was he paranoid, or was he just traumatized? He was triggered by this situation, and he did finally calm down. Fascinating man with lots of blemishes and lots of good points. He wanted to be an absolute monarch, and I would say he had more success with that in Scotland. They were more accustomed to the divine right of kings than the English were. He pushed as far as he could with Parliament, got away with as much as he could. His son, Charles I, took things a bit further than that. Very enjoyable. Queen James, everybody. That was my gay pride read. I read Kate Beaton's book, Shark Girl, and I finished it yesterday. It was a complete waste of time for me, but it's a kid's book, so I had no business reading it. Had I known it was a kid's book, I wouldn't have bothered. I'm a little distressed to say that I didn't have time to start either of the two books I told you last week I'd be starting. I have not had time to even open them, and now I'm starting some more, so I have to watch myself and not let things get out of control. I can't remember if I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is going to be a surprise, maybe a pleasant one for ya. I have a bail to tell you about. I have bailed on The Foolish Gentlewoman by Margery. Mum didn't like it at all, and I didn't like it well enough to ask her to indulge me and finish it together, so we stopped after 45 pages. This was published in 1948. The weakness from our point of view is that the main character is a stodgy 60-year-old bachelor, and he's not pleasant to be in the head of. He's not loathsome, but he's just a stick in the mud, and we're in his head more than anybody else's, at least in the first 45 pages. I'm assuming there would be a character development, but he wasn't funny at all. He was the opposite of funny. She is a very funny writer. The one I read by her before was really funny. The Scamp, the mischievous young woman, I think that was called The Nutmeg Tree. And this one was mostly in his head, and he was just kind of boring and critical of everybody. Some people would appreciate the humor in that, but it fell flat for us. It takes a special literary skill to tell an unconventional story, and this was very unconventional. He was the brother-in-law of the other main character, who was widowed. She had moved back into her childhood home, and this stodgy brother-in-law was living there with her. She didn't have kids, but she had picked up some woman, not in a sexual sense, on the train back to London from wherever she'd been during the war that she didn't know very well, and a nephew who was just demobilized from World War II. And that woman and her nephew start a romance. They'd had housekeepers during the war and told them they could stay there. So none of these relationships are the kind in which a story naturally... And it takes a while if it's going to be successful, and some people, I know Melanie, thought this was a 5-star read. I'm not adverse to picking it up later and finishing it, but with such unconventional, distant connections between the characters, nothing was happening other than getting them into rooms together and getting relationships going, because they just didn't have enough deep history with each other. There was no backstory that was holding our interest. So I bailed, my second bail of the year. And I'll tell you what we've chosen instead in a minute. In fact, I'll tell you, I'm starting 3 books this week. And that's crazy when I couldn't get to the books that I said I was starting last week, but just bear with me. So what I did with Mum was I didn't tell her the title or author, and I read the synopsis, plus the first page or 2 to her and let her choose. I was so delighted that she chose the same one that I did when I did this with her on Facebook Messenger yesterday. I just got the message from her. She was too tired to listen to book number 3 before she went to bed. She listened to it this morning and she said, oh my God, yes, hands down, book number 3. So finally, I've had this book on my shelf for 5 years or more, where I will be reading Oh, the Brave Music by Dorothy Evelyn Smith. This is part of the British Library Women Writers series. I've been collecting these, and this one I'd heard was one of the better ones. I've read some clunkers in this series, but I've read some that were better, and this apparently is one of the best of them. It starts before the First World War. Dorothy Evelyn Smith, 1893 to 1969, started writing during the First World War, while she was also a clerk at the War Office. This was her 1943 debut novel. She described herself as writing on the end of the kitchen table with bombs falling around the house. She was born in Derby, England, the daughter of a Methodist parson. The main character is the daughter, and she's, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 in this opening scene, but she's at church, and she wants to steal. She's so naughty, and we're in her head. It's first person. She wants to steal the pink silk bow off of the girl's hat in the pew in front of her. She wants it for a purpose that wasn't clear to me. She'd promised it to my little man, and by the end of that, I wasn't clear. Was my little man a doll? Was it a a pet. Was it a dog? It wasn't a boyfriend, I don't think. It doesn't matter. Even not quite being clear about these details, it was one of the most entertaining openings to a novel that I've read in a long time, and I was chuckling. So I thought, oh, I'm kind of tipping the scales in favor of this one for Mum because I couldn't stop laughing. And she thought it was hilarious. The other thing about the story is that she moves from this manse under the strict rule of her father to an estate of her mother's. And editing Sean here, well, I don't know what the hell happened to the audio for the last 3 or 4 minutes of the video, but you could hear it was just went really nuts. So I don't know why that makes me really nervous. Well, it's never happened before. So I've deleted all that, and I am now, it's 6 p.m. I've been editing this video for 6 hours, and I can't give you the full spiel at the end. So I'll just quickly say I'm looking forward to continuing this Oh, the Brave music with Mum, hopefully later tonight. And I am starting 2 others. I am starting The Sea of Poppies by the Indian writer Amitav Ghosh. Ghosh? I've forgotten. I can't wait to read it. I'm doing it as a buddy read. I'll explain the situation of that buddy read a little later. I'm just way too tired to regurgitate all of the details I've already filmed at 11 o'clock this morning. But that's a classic of Indian literature that I am finally going to tackle. It's going to be a long-term pseudo buddy read, finish it by the end of the year. And I will, for the first time ever, be participating in Jane Austen July, and the group read is Emma by Jane Austen, which is my favorite. And I've wanted to reread it for years, and I'll put a link to I believe that it's Katie of Books and Things, but I can't remember. There's 2 other co-hosts. I'll put all those announcement videos in the show notes, so get started with that. I am probably biting off more than I can chew, but these are the happiest of problems, and that is the abbreviated ending to my Friday reads. Thanks for watching.